All right. Cool. So if you're here, Raj, you're here. You already know why you're here. But for anyone that's watching this after the fact or on LinkedIn or whatever, this is sprint review for sprint number one in my endeavor here to build out a online Scrum class. And I'm doing that as a one-person team. I'm using Scrum to do it. I wanted to record the sprint review for a couple of reasons. One, I need some feedback from people because I'm only one person. So especially from people that might find this product useful at some point in the future. So I'd call you a stakeholder for that. But also because I think these sessions might make a good addition to the course itself. So it's a little bit meta, but people can watch a video module about what a sprint review is, and then right away they can watch a video of kind of a real sprint review actually happening. So this is going to be a real sprint review. So I'm going to talk about my goals. We're going to look at least a little bit of what I actually built this sprint. I'll ask you for any feedback that you might have. This isn't just a demo. It's meant to get feedback from people. And I'll share my future plans when it looks like we think will be done and a little bit of market research. So with that, let me get my screen share going here. Where are we? Here we are. Using my trusty mural tool for this. So goals wise, I have a product goal here. And my product goal, the thing that I'm striving toward, the thing that's going to take a whole bunch of sprints to get to is just this, right? We want to have an online self-paced course for Scrum Masters and for teams who would like to adopt or improve their use of Scrum and various complementary practices. And so that kind of touches on everything. I made a small change to my product goal as I was working through this. I added the word self-paced here because I just wanted to be really clear that this is for people to watch as they want to consume it. It's not like an all-in-one kind of all-in-one shot kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm working towards. It's going to take a little while to get there. This first sprint that I'm doing, my sprint goal is right here. I wanted to get at least a course introduction video and a Scrum overview video recorded and posted to some online learning platform. And I think I achieved that. I got those two videos recorded. They are actually posted on the platform. They are not live because I don't think there's enough value there yet to make it live, but at least we can go look at it and see what it's actually going to look like on the site. So those are my goals. We're going to get into a little bit of a demonstration here. I'm going to start with just looking at how this is going to look in the platform itself, and then we'll watch the video itself because I can't share the video from the platform because the screen share thing isn't going to work. So as far as the tool goes, or the platform, I should say, so I decided on Udemy, partially because it seems like it's the easiest one to get started as an instructor. It's pretty easy to post things and get things set up. They do some weird stuff with revenue share that I'm not a huge fan of, but for ease of use, that's kind of the one I'm going with. And so I was able to build out the skeleton of the class in Udemy. So this is a preview. What sucks is I can't show a preview of what the course listing will look like, but this is what it will look like if you subscribe to it and you actually were inside. And before we look at the content, there's a little bit of description about the course, some quick learning objectives that we're after. So the idea is if you take the class, you should be able to apply Scrum right away. You shouldn't have to do anything else to be able to start applying Scrum. You should be able to support your team, start earning some trust by demonstrating the value of Scrum. This is just a very specific call out because I think it's important. One of the later modules will be about planning and forecasting with empiricism using Scrum. I also put this point here. This is not really built towards getting people to take an exam or get certified or anything like that, but it kind of lines up with it. So you will end up with all the knowledge you need to pass a certification exam. And I'm not pointing people towards a particular type or group or anything like that. But if you're preparing for an exam, it's probably a good way to do it. The only prereqs really for this class is just learner's mindset. I'm assuming you know nothing about Scrum. Maybe you have some enthusiasm for agility, but that's about it. And this is for just the people you see listed here, right? Scrum Masters that are maybe struggling with Scrum. Maybe they've been doing it, not quite getting the value that they were hoping to get out of it. Maybe having some struggles out of the gate, that sort of thing. But this should also work for the entire Scrum team. So whatever role you have on a Scrum team. If you're looking for a refresher, if you need to reset your process, hopefully the idea is this should be helpful for those people as well. And there's this other group of folks that are maybe looking to make a transition towards becoming a Scrum Master from a career change perspective. So the idea is this would work for them to help them get off to a good start, right? Start with a clean baseline, which is something that I missed out very dearly on when I first became a Scrum Master. I was missing all of this like foundational stuff, and it would have been really helpful. So I think it kind of suits those people pretty well so far. So that's just the outline of the course. Nice thing about Udemy is you can build out the curriculum before actually having the content. So I've kind of structured it here. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but basically it's going to be broken into these big chunks. There's going to be some introduction stuff. There's going to be all of the accountabilities that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about all of the events that we have in Scrum, the artifacts that we need to produce. And then I have this bottom section, which is just Scrum and. So all the stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with Scrum particular, but that you may want to layer in because it may be helpful just from my own experiences. So things like bringing some Kanban into Scrum, some more of that planning stuff, retrospectives, facilitation, all that kind of good stuff. Thoughts, questions, feedback so far? You're on mute.
Right. Probably there should be a course on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, saying, looks nice, makes sense. I guess I'm still mulling through the outline itself. In terms of examples, are you planning to have some, and would they be like, I guess, disconnected, or are you hoping to like have an example, start to finish, that the listeners can kind of go through with it?
That's a good question. I think, and just the fact that you brought that up tells me that I probably need to do it this way. But I think what I'm going to do is in each of these buckets here, I'm going to add some like example videos. Basically, like this video that we're recording right now will probably show up in the events section right under sprint planning. So the progression will be like learn about the thing, see the thing happening, learn about something else, see the thing happening. So you kind of you have the option at least to see the examples as you're working through it. I wasn't too sure which way to go, like either bulk it all at the bottom or kind of sprinkle it throughout. But just the fact that it came up already, I think I'm probably going to sprinkle it throughout.
Sure. Yeah, it's also like fresh on my mind because I'm trying to do something similar within my org. So we're coming up with like a product owner training. And so like, just kind of working through that, examples is kind of top of mind. So, something else that's kind of coming up for me, and I don't know, how it kind of relates to this, but, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, and maybe, you might do a better job of it, is so like with the product owner training, at least, like one of the challenges that, I've often noticed is that a lot of the trainings kind of focus on the practices and not as much on like, what really makes a good product manager, right? And so like the road mapping aspect of like, there's definitely, principles that you want to be following in terms of Agile or Scrum or whatever, but also like the, where does the journey start? Right. And so like one of the things that we're experimenting with is instead of, starting with events and accountabilities, maybe starting with like, hey, here's your overall role. Let's take a feature or a product end to end, right? So let's start with that road mapping or vision aspect, build up those examples and kind of walk you through all the way to the end and, going through events at the very end. I'm wondering, like, how that kind of relates to this, and is there something similar we could do for, like, Scrum Masters or, in that?
Yeah, that's an interesting take. There's a challenge here, which is we are trying to cover all of the roles as part of the class, right?
Sure.
However, it may be interesting to see kind of interspersed maybe throughout each of these having like a short like through the eyes of video, right? So as we kind of go through, I mean, the box here is Scrum, right? This isn't meant to be like a be all end all for overall, business agility or anything like that. But, hearing you kind of talk through that, I'm thinking about the various events, at least that we have in Scrum, and maybe having like 3 very short snippets underneath each of them, which is like what this event looks like through the eyes of a product owner and some ideas
Mm,
around what you may need to be doing as a product owner, like over the course of that event.
sure. Yeah, as you said that, what was kind of coming up for me was like, well, the target market for this training as well, right? Like we probably
Mhm.
want to focus on like, what's the primary persona. But then as I was thinking through it, I was like, well, maybe the primary persona is a change agent, right? And if that's the case, then they probably need to understand what this looks like from different views anyway, because like, that's what they'll be, living and breathing.
Yeah.
But yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's almost like a recursive thing kind of happening there, right? Where like,
Sure.
yes, the main persona for this is probably Scrum Masters. However, Scrum Masters may want to bring this to their teams to help the entire
Sure.
team better understand the
Mm,
framework. So having it kind of sliced up a little bit that way, if you're a product owner, you may watch the sprint planning video, and then you may not watch the Scrum Master at the sprint planning video, but you may watch the product owner at the sprint
sure.
planning video, kind of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, as
so
long as
there's
it doesn't like add a bunch of scope to the training, I think it's a good, goal to kind of work towards.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think we can slice it small enough that it might
Sure.
make sense to kind of sprinkle in.
Cool. Yeah, otherwise, looks good.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. I'm going to stop my screen share here because the other thing we have to look at is I wanted to at least play one of the videos. I'm not going to show the intro video because that's just me talking about myself and who cares. But I am going to play what I got for the overview video. So it ended up being a little bit longer than I was hoping. It clocked in at like 12 minutes, and there's still stuff that I wasn't able to get in there. But I would like to get maybe some fresh eyes on it. So I'm going to share it through Zoom. Hopefully it actually works. And then you can tell me what you think about it.
Sounds good.
All right. Where did it go? You see a video share happening right now?
I see a stagnant screen, but yeah,
Yeah. All
it's
right.
from.
I'm going to go ahead and hit play. That should be working. Scrum is the most popular of the Agile frameworks, but it also happens to be one of the most misunderstood frameworks. And throughout this class, we're going to be diving into the details of the framework and maybe busting some myths that you may have about the framework. However, it would be good to kind of start with an overview. And so we can all kind of get on the same page about the language, what the words are, and just have a good base to build from. And the first thing we need to talk about is the proper definition of Scrum. And this is straight from the Scrum Guide. So you can go to scrumguides.org to read the entire thing right over here. But this is the short version of it. It's a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. And the one word I want to highlight here is right here, framework. It is a framework. Scrum is not a process. Scrum is not a methodology. It's just a framework. It's very lightweight. It will tell you whether or not all of the other things that you're doing as part of your process are effective or not. So that's kind of the proper definition of the framework. And what you're looking at here is essentially the entirety of the Scrum framework. We have all the elements we need to do Scrum visualized on the page. And so I'm going to talk through these kind of maybe a little bit left to right here, get through the whole thing, and that'll give us a solid baseline from which we can explore these topics a little bit more deeply. So on the left side here, we have our Scrum team, right? We have our three accountabilities that we have in Scrum. We have the Scrum Master, we have the product owner, and we have the developers. And the Scrum Master's role in all of this is to kind of uphold this whole framework, right? Make sure everybody knows how to operate within the framework, essentially make sure that it's all happening and make sure that it's effective and positive and all that sort of thing. Then we have the product owner, and the product owner's job in all of this, very simply stated, and this is straight from the Scrum Guide, the product owner's job is to maximize the value of the product. And another way to think about that is maximize the value of the work of the developers, who are the next accountability we need to talk about in Scrum, right? The developers, the people that are building the product. And we use the word developer very generically, right? We are not talking about only people that are writing code, but anybody that's contributing work to building the product. So that can be could be programmers, quality assurance testers, um, business analysts, designers, anybody that is involved in producing that product. They are called a developer in Scrum, and they are part of the Scrum team. So the Scrum team, these little characters that we have right here, all those accountabilities working together make up the Scrum team. And so we've got our team intact. We've got all of the accountabilities taken care of. So how do we do all this stuff? And so that's kind of what we're looking at here. So we're going to kind of do this left to right. I'm going to be mixing between some of the artifacts we have to produce and some of the events that we have in Scrum to inspect and adapt all of those artifacts. So the first one we need to talk about is this one right here, the product backlog, right? This big stack of things we need to do, right? Changes we need to make to our product, things we need to do to improve the product. And these could be new features, these could be fixing bugs, whatever the case may be. And in Scrum, we generically refer to those as just product backlog items, right? So we have a product backlog made up of product backlog items that are just simply changes that we need to make to our products. And there's one thing I want to call out here in the visualization, this kind of stacked item here. You'll notice that things at the top tend to be a little bit smaller and things at the bottom tend to be a little bit bigger. And that is really just to highlight that we don't want to spend too much time refining items that are like close to the bottom of our product backlog that we're not going to be working on anytime soon. It's okay to have those kind of big and vague and maybe not super well understood, but items that are towards the top of our product backlog, we want to have a solid understanding of those. We want to have them broken down into smaller bits that we can ship individually and get to value sooner, all that sort of thing. So that's why you see that here in this sort of stacked list of things. So we've got our product backlog, all the changes that we need to make to our product. So to start our sprint, we need to do something, right? We have an event in Scrum, and that event is called sprint planning. And sprint planning, our entire Scrum team over here comes along for the ride. And we are looking at the product backlog and ultimately coming up with a plan for the sprint. And there are a few specific things we need to answer as part of that event, as part of sprint planning. We need to understand the why, right? What is the point of this sprint? And we do that through something called a sprint goal, which we will talk about further in further modules. But we need to have a goal for the sprint. That helps us understand why we're doing this sprint. What's the point, right? Gives us something to focus on. So we need to have a sprint goal. We need to understand the what. So what are the items from our product backlog that we think we can get done in the sprint? What are the things we're forecasting we think we can get done within the sprint? That's the what. And we need to have some sense of the how, right? What's the plan for that? And so for some teams, that means tasking out the items. Could be also just kind of talking about them and having a general idea of how we're going to get them done. There's no real prescription for that, but we want to have some idea of the how, right? So we need to know the why, the what, and the how. And that's all done at sprint planning, and that's the entire team, the entire Scrum team getting together and doing that. And the output of that sprint planning meeting is a whole different artifact, right? It's the sprint backlog. This thing over here, it's a subset of the product backlog, right? It's all the stuff from the product backlog that the developers on the Scrum team decided that they thought they could get done within the sprint, and that will help us to achieve our sprint goal. So all of that stuff we talked about at sprint planning, right? The why, the what, and the how, the sprint goal, the product backlog items, and the plan to complete those are all kind of living now in the sprint backlog. And the sprint backlog has a very specific set of owners. It is very specifically owned by the developers on the Scrum team, right? So no one else can really touch or do anything with the sprint backlog. It's owned by the developers once the sprint starts. So we've done our sprint planning, we've got our sprint backlog. Now we are effectively off to the races. So our Scrum team is kind of like in the sprint now. They are doing the work. They are taking those items in our sprint backlog and turning them into potentially shippable, potentially releasable working bits of product. And every day throughout that throughout that sprint, we do something called a daily scrum, right? That's the next event we're going to talk about. That's this extra loop on top of the loop here near the top. Every day we get together, 15 minutes, quick planning meeting. That's all it is, right? This is not a status report for the product owner or anything like that. This is specifically for the developers on the Scrum team to get together and have a quick chat about what they're going to do today to get a little bit closer to the sprint goal, right? We're talking about our progress towards the sprint goal. What do we have to do next to get a little bit closer to that? And that's the daily Scrum. So that's happening every day, 15 minutes or less. Hopefully at the same time, the same place to make it a little bit easier for everyone to kind of remember and be on the same page with that. So we're kind of doing that every day. We're going through the sprint, and finally we have some output of that sprint, right? We have some kind of what we call the increment, right? This is that potentially releasable, valuable, useful to somebody increment of the product, right? All the stuff we did that we got to done all lives in that increment. And it's great that we have that, but we need to do something to look at that, right? We need to have an event to inspect that artifact that we've built, the increment. And we do that at something called the sprint review, right? So the sprint review is all about looking at what we've built, looking at the product, the increment of the product that we've built, looking at it together with our stakeholders, talking about our future plans, getting feedback on what we've built, and hopefully taking some of that feedback and then going back and updating our product backlog way over here in the beginning. Right? The whole point of the sprint review is to get enough data, enough feedback to be able to go back and update our product backlog. Right? Once we see a little piece of the product, usually that's going to help us figure out what we need to do next. So that's kind of the point of the sprint review. It's not just a demonstration, it's a review, right? We are looking at it together. We're updating our plans. We're being transparent about our future plans, all that sort of thing. Once we're done with the sprint review, which is about the product, we need to have some time ourselves as a Scrum team to talk about ourselves, essentially. And that's what we call the sprint retrospective. And that's, again, the entire Scrum team coming along for the ride here. Every sprint, having a little bit of time set aside to talk about ourselves, right? The sprint review is about the product. The sprint retrospective is about ourselves, right? How can we change in the next sprint to become a better team, or to be more happy in the work that we're doing, or to provide more value, or whatever it is that we're striving towards. It's really for the team to talk about how to improve as a team. And we do that at the end of every single sprint. We have our sprint retrospective. And once that's done, you go back to the beginning, right? As soon as you're done the sprint, next sprint starts. You have your sprint planning meeting and you go through the entire flow again. So this entire visualization that you see here really is just this, right? The sprint. Everything in Scrum happens within a sprint. There are no special sprints. There's no gap in between sprints. You have a sprint. Your goal is to achieve the sprint goal, produce a done increment of the product, and we keep doing that time and time again. So that's the framework kind of in a nutshell. We'll do another module where we talk a little bit more about these Scrum values that you see here at the bottom, but really important to know what these are, right? The entire framework is built on top of these 5 Scrum values. The framework is purposefully incomplete, right? It doesn't tell us everything that we need to do. We're going to have to figure some stuff out. There's a lot of gray area in between these very few guidelines that we have. And the Scrum values can really help us to figure out what do we need to do in a given situation, right? So we have the value of commitment, courage, respect, openness, and focus. And when we're not really sure what to do, we can lean on those 5 things and look for the right balance of those 5 things to help us understand what we need to do in a given situation. So that's it. That's the overview. That's kind of Scrum in a nutshell. As you work through the rest of this class, you'll find us diving deep into each of these different areas. And we're also going to talk about some complementary areas, things that maybe fill in some of the gaps that aren't really in the Scrum guide, but might be good to know about. All right. That's that. it's weird watching a video through Zoom and then stopping it, and then now it's just your face again. It's really kind of jarring. I'm gonna switch over to sharing my mural board here while you all are kind of thinking about what you just saw. There we go. So that was meant to be like basically the second video in the course, right? There's going to be an intro where I'm just talking a little bit about myself and what to expect. And then there's the overview to kind of touch on almost everything that we're going to talk about throughout the class. Looking for feedback on the video. I have some prompts here just to kind of think about, but could be anything that may have popped to mind as you were watching that. I captured one thing that I noticed that I didn't notice the first time I watched this video was at the beginning in the first couple minutes, there's a few parts where the video gets really choppy. I don't know if you noticed it through Zoom, but there's like a bunch of like frame drops. There's like sections where my face just gets stuck and you can hear the sound, but like the video doesn't update right away. So I don't know if that was just because I was playing it through Zoom or what. I'm gonna have to go back and look at that. And then I just captured some of the stuff that we talked about before, Raj, when we were looking at the course outline itself. But as far as the video goes, you know, if you were working with a new team, let's say you're a Scrum Master joining a new team, and you showed them a video like that, kind of put yourself in their shoes a little bit. What do you think they might say? How do you think they might react to that video?
So I guess, I can go first. Um, it's difficult, I guess, to like think about it because like, some of this is second nature.
Yeah.
But what was coming up for me, whether related to this prompt or not, was I found the diagram to not be super clear. And I was wondering if, we can do something about it. Also, like when you were kind of dragging and dropping like the different elements, like, yes, that's nice, but I think with, the tool you had, there's this toolbar that shows up at the top, right? And that was like super distracting for me and was kind of like, I guess hiding the diagram a bit as well. So
Yep.
that's where I was thinking maybe like Miro has like different areas, right? So like we could zoom in and zoom out and like, just kind of navigate through the different areas, almost like a PowerPoint, or like, still kind of do the drag and drop, but like, do something about the toolbar there, right? In terms of the diagram itself, I know like, copywriting and those kind of challenges do exist, but like if we could use, I guess, like arrows more so than like freehand drawing, which I think is, what we kind of used. I imagine that might just kind of make things a bit more clearer. Uh, and yeah, I wasn't super sure why you had like circles around like the review and the retrospective. I feel like what you were trying to maybe do there was like saying like, hey, this happens on a regular basis, and like it's kind of connected to, back to the product backlog, and like the whole, loop is a cycle. But then that wasn't super clear either for me. So like those
Yeah.
things that were kind of coming up for me.
Yep. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I struggled with trying to figure out like a way to visualize. What I was trying to get across was this is an event where something is happening. There's some motion here, right? We're doing planning, we're doing a retrospective. Trying to have like kind of a key for like, oh, when you see this icon, you should think of a meeting.
Mhm.
And it's entirely possible that I missed the mark a little bit with that. I think though, going back and to your point about not having it just like free drawn, there may be some like pre-canned stuff that might
Sure.
make it a little bit more obvious.
Sure. Yeah, I did like a quick search online, and I think there are definitely some, pictures there that might kind of come in handy. And maybe you can just like recreate them with like a few tweaks, right?
Yep.
Um, but yeah. Other than
Cool.
that, like from a content perspective, I think you kind of covered the basic stuff for sure. It wasn't too long. The one piece, and I don't know if this is like, out of scope for like the product itself, is like I typically like to start with like, hey, here's how Scrum fits into Agile, right? Like what's Agile, what's like all the different terms that you've probably heard about and are confused, how do they all kind of relate? Not like, super deep, but just like, Kanban, Lean, Agile, modern product management, modern, UX principles or like engineering principles, right? And just kind of say like, hey, it's all aligned. It's not like, kind of going against each other. So yeah, like maybe something around that, but if you're assuming that they already know about Agile and it's just like Scrum that they're trying to get more knowledgeable on, then
Yeah.
maybe skippable.
Yeah. There was one point where I was considering doing that as kind of a separate, like almost in between the introduction and the overview to kind of set maybe some of that context. But yeah, that might be a good add in between
Sure.
those two.
Yeah, and maybe it's like, one of those nice to have features, right? Once you're like done with the course, that's when you kind of build that out.
Yeah.
And lastly, I feel like from a content delivery perspective, you did a great job. But then towards the end, there's this like, all right, well, kind of done. Like, so maybe like, a phrase like, see you in the next session or something like that, I feel like would have given it a good transition.
Yep.
But yeah. Yeah, I think that's all the stuff that came to mind for me.
Cool. Yeah, that helps. I think for that last one, I have to check how. One thing I didn't test and I actually should is how Udemy does the video progression, because I think as soon as one ends, it dumps you right into the next one right away. So
Yes, but even then, like I've watched a few, like I've done a few trainings online on Udemy,
okay.
and yeah, I always like that transition. Maybe it's just like a personal preference,
Yep.
because there is some time between like ramping down one video and ramping up the other one.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's good. That
Right.
helps.
And last note, sorry, and I don't know if this applies to Udemy or not, but I know at least on YouTube, I personally prefer videos which have like timestamps so that I can like, fast forward and go back to where I'm really interested in. I'm not sure if that's available on Udemy, but yeah, that
I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about. I don't know if they have that function. You can scrub for sure. It tells you like you can move things around, but it doesn't allow you to break down. I think the way that they want you to do it is the breakdown should be in how the videos themselves are broken down.
sure.
But that's a good thought. I'm gonna investigate that.
Yeah, I mean, like the MVP of it, if Udemy doesn't support it, is you can always like put that in the comments or like the description piece of like, here's where I don't even know if like, that's something that you'll need a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always kind of go back and just kind of, put it in there.
Yeah, there's definitely a description for each video. So at the very least, yeah, we can just do that. Go to 1 minute 30 for this or that or whatever.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay, perfect. Let me go next. First, thank you so
Sure.
much. I like the way that you did it. Like it looks like interactive more, and it looks like face to face. You are like on the whiteboard and trying to write everyone for or explain everything for them. But I agree actually with Raj about if I'm someone who just want to explore the Scrum, but I don't know anything about Agile, I will like feel like, okay, so what's this all for? So starting with like, what is Agile? What is the mindset? What is the differences between like Agile, traditional project management, or the XP or other like frameworks as well? It will, even if it will be like a small thing or like a few words description, maybe it will help for to understand what's really coming on, what is the relation between all the things that you are explaining. Another thing related to the board itself, I find it's great. I'm sorry I was late a little bit, but I'm not sure if when you started, like all the like events or like the artifacts or the team, like where's there? Like you started the board, have all those components there?
They were there, but kind of all off to the side. So the idea is like you can see the words, and then as we talk through them, we kind of drag them to where they actually fit in on the picture.
Okay, so if so, one of like my comments, if I'm someone who doesn't know about Scrum and then I got this board in front of me and you are talking and I'm like looking through the board, I will like a little bit focus on what's going on, written here, what is this components, and maybe like lose the focus for the instructor or the like coach who's like doing this for me. So maybe I'm gonna focus. So if like maybe for some people, if you start with like a clean board and start to like say, okay, we have the Scrum team contains this and this and this, and start to write it in front. And then we have this events 1, 2, 3, 4, and how we can like utilize, and then you can continue like interactively like you did it. I feel maybe you can get that more attention from them. Other like regardless, sometimes I'm one of them. If I'm like seeing something on the board, I will focus on it. Maybe I will lose attention with who's speaking.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think just to let you both know how I did that, I built that board in Mural. So you're looking at Mural, but you're just looking at like a section of it. So I think what I can do, because what I want to avoid is like having to type while I'm talking, right? I don't want to be typing into the stickies. What I can do is just leave them on the board, but off the screen so that you can't see them. And then I drag them into the view as I'm talking about them. That's a good point. Raj, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, something related. So I kind of felt like the other way around, which is like I liked that, you had those three, different categories out there, but I feel like maybe a miss was, we didn't call them out. So like I knew why they were, differently color coded and why they were in different categories. But then I was like, well, we didn't really spend any time, or like even just, maybe a title might help, right? Like this is the artifact section and this is the event section. And so, I was trying to, in my mind, comprehend what's the value of like, dragging something down and like have that messy toolbar versus like zoom in and zoom out. But if you do want to do that, I feel like just maybe, spending a few seconds or like just even having a title might actually add more value, because, that's something that, at least from a test perspective, people are always trying to, remember is like, oh, what are the artifacts and like, what are the events and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. I can't believe I didn't even think about like I group them, but not titling them is kind of weird, because now you're like, why are these?
Well, it's because you sleep and breathe Agile, right?
That's the problem. That's the problem. We need to get back to reality.
The blind spot.
Yeah.
And also another note, you like spent good enough time for the whole cycle or the whole framework, but when you started to explain about the Scrum values, it takes like, okay, it's a second, like let's finish. Like, so this is what I even, so maybe we need some like small like few minutes more on Scrum values. And then the ending note as well about like okay, this is like what we have today, or like see you next time. So
just close it off kind of thing. Yeah, that's good. For the
pile on, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not to pile on, but I believe there's like the 3 pillars of Scrum, right? Empiricism, like transparency, inspection, and whatever the third one is. My bad, I'm not remembering. But anyway, yeah. So what I was thinking was, so I actually liked. Let me rephrase this. So when I saw you spend less time on the values of Scrum, I assumed you were going to spend more time in the follow-up sessions and like, call out like, hey, here's really where, that kind of gets pulled in, right? Like that to me makes sense, because, I really want to hear about it in the weeds of things, right? And not just like, oh, this is important, but maybe to, sorry, I'm going to totally butcher the name here, but do you pronounce it Zainab?
Zainab, yeah.
Zainab. All right, cool. So to Zainab's point, maybe there is value in having like the 3 pillars out first, and at least kind of talk about, why the inspection and adaptation cycle, right? And then kind of, push these values out to a later point.
Or maybe even a small thing that highlights on the sessions that you're going to talk more about those values in the upcoming sessions, for example.
I think that's where I was trying to go with the values, and it didn't quite come out that way. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go with them. I'm either going to cut them out of the overview video altogether and just have like a separate, like very short video right after the overview where I talk about that, or just kind of clean it up and be like, these are the 5 things. You're going to hear about them as we talk about all the different elements and how important they are and blah, 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 and just kind of clean it up a little bit. Not sure which way to go, but one of those 2 probably.
Sure. Yeah, my personal preference would be the second one, but that's just me.
Yeah. Yep. And then, yeah, good call out on the pillars. It's one of those, like, it's the risk is like making all this stuff way too long and then people just kind of like tune out. But 3 pillars are so important. I know we were already talking about like having another video that, like, how does it fit into Agile? I think combining the pillars with the how it fits in thing, that can still be like a 3-minute video, I think, and just be enough to like kind of put the very base layer of all of this in place before we get into the weeds of the framework. All right.
That's great.
This is awesome. You've both given me some really good stuff to think about. I think where this is going is I'm probably gonna have to either re-record or at least re-record part of that overview video before we move on to the next pieces.
But you did it one shot, or you like doing video editing?
So that one was one shot.
Oh, okay.
And my goal is for each video to try to do them one shot, because the production costs, like in terms of time, because I'm doing this all myself, skyrockets. Like I had to learn how to use Adobe Premiere. I haven't used it in years. So just getting through that is a bit of a lift. So I'm always going to try to get it in one shot, but there's going to be times where there will be some cutting and splicing and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. All right. Lots of awesome feedback. I'm going to talk really quick about upcoming plans, and then we'll be done. So I just took a snip of my Jira, and I'm using Jira. As much as I hate Jira, I'm using it because I want to feel everyone's pain, because I know everyone's kind of forced to use it a lot. But right now, this is what's kind of floating around the top of my backlog. I already was thinking about this, the values, and I also missed the commitments a little bit in the overview video, so having a separate one for those ones. My initial thought was to kind of go through the curriculum as I've kind of laid it out here and just build out the videos one at a time. But I want to get to something that's valuable more quickly. And so the way I'm kind of treating my backlog, oops, I looks like I got the screenshot of it, is to kind of mix it up a little bit. So I think, like, by the next sprint, and now I'm gonna have to change this a bit because I have some rework to do a little bit. But if I can get to the end of next sprint and have at least talk about the values, talk about empiricism, all that other stuff, a good overview of what the Scrum Master role is, a good walkthrough of the entire sprint itself. So that's going to force me to touch on in a little bit more detail on each of the events, and talk about the product backlog. If I can get those 3 or 4 things in, I think I'd have something that is at least valuable. I don't know that I would sell it. I don't think I'd get much revenue for it, but I can put it in front of people that have never seen this stuff before. And I think it'd be a little bit more better than just having like, hey, here's a section about the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developers. And we have no idea how they work together or what they actually have to do yet. So I think that's kind of the philosophy, at least when it comes to prioritization.
This I'm gonna go first. This sounds great. And if you like just combine the real experience or the practical experience plus the Scrum guide, like what said or what should the Scrum be, but also there is the real world that we can do 1, 2, 3. I think it will be a great experience for the people who will take this course to know more and to gain this experience.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm recording all of these things, right? Because even when I get to the end of this second sprint, if I have this kind of structure in place, I can start sprinkling in some of these videos that I've already recorded, so they can see a sprint review, they can see a sprint planning, they can see a daily Scrum as part of like right under the sprint module kind of thing. So yeah, go ahead, Rush.
I guess what's kind of coming up for me is like, if you feel like, this order here is the most valuable and would provide value to your students, would it make sense if you redid the outline of the course as well and kind of, made this a section altogether? Because like as a student, if I'm trying to learn, right? and like this is what you feel like is the most valuable elements, then that's what my first section should be. But yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
I don't
point.
know. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah. I think like the way this will ultimately be organized is like basically these things will be the first video in each of the sections. And maybe what I can do is leave a pointer in the overview video that says, look, if you want to just get to value as quickly as you can, get like the full view in a little bit more detail, watch the first video from each section, and then you can go back and get into the weeds with each of them, however far you want to go.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That could work.
Yeah, that's kind of the thinking. Yeah. Okay, cool. So anyways, that's the current thought. I'm gonna have to change this a little bit based on feedback, but that's the philosophy at least behind prioritization. I'm gonna show one more thing, and I was debating whether or not to show something like this because I don't usually do it this way. But I want to give you all and people watching an idea of when I think I might be done this whole thing. I have almost no data, right? One sprint and it was kind of bumpy, and a lot of it was infrastructure and blah, 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 blah. But what I did was I looked at my product backlog. I counted up how many items were in there. There was 20. I got done 3 in this sprint, and then I just plotted all that out. And so if I stick to that kind of pace, and it might get better or worse, I don't know. We'll see what it looks like next sprint. But if I put that all together, it lands in about 6 or so more sprints from today, which is about 12 weeks, which brings me into January of next year. The problem is there's holidays in there, and holidays aren't reflected. And I'm not planning on doing a whole lot of work between Christmas and New Year, to be honest. So this will probably actually bump out another sprint or two, depending on how things go. But the goal though is if I can get to like some value over here, and if I can ship something in like sprint 3, I'm just going to do that, and then just kind of build on it as we go. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That's kind of what we're tracking towards, about a few months worth of work here to get this done. One thing that's usually missing from sprint reviews, some kind of market update. I don't have anything right now. I haven't shipped, so I don't know if anyone actually would buy this. I have no clue. But I did kind of poke around a little bit, put my product owner hat, do some market research, light market research. There is definitely a market for this kind of stuff. It's also very saturated. If you go to Udemy and look for Scrum, there's 2,800 courses available, which is an insane number, which is kind of discouraging. But on the flip side, people are actually willing to pay for this kind of stuff. I just looked at one of the top courses currently in the list, almost 70,000 students. And yes, Udemy does weird stuff with prices and all that sort of thing, but that's a lot of people that decide to, fork over $1 for some content. So I do think that there's some potential there, at least, to kind of put this out there and, generate some amount of revenue at least.
So I'm glad you kind of, brought this up because, I did have that question as well. I guess, what do you feel makes your training stand out and like, get more students than the other 2,800? Like,
Yeah.
what do you feel like, you're going to do that?
There's 2 sides to that. The one is, I didn't look at all of them, obviously, but the ones I was looking at, they're all mostly academic, right? They're all mostly just talking about the theory, and you don't really see a lot of examples of actually doing the things that are being talked about in the course. So I think that is a differentiator, and that's actually going to cause me to go back and change my course description a little bit to make it clear that like you're not just going to see me talk about Scrum, you're going to see me do Scrum. If you're watching this video as part of that, very meta, you're looking at it. So I think that's a differentiator. The other side to it, though, is what this tells me is I probably don't want to rely exclusively on Udemy as like my sales channel, quote unquote, right? Not to get into like the business model of all this, but I'm gonna have to find other ways to drive potential customers to this page and potentially buy the thing, whether that's through advertising, through a website, or whatever. So there's some like, longer term go to market stuff that's rattling around in my head that is probably more than just like hit the publish button on Udemy. There's probably a bit more to it than that.
Sure. And like, I don't want to feel like, negative Nancy or whatever, but like I've always struggled to, I guess, understand what motivates people to pay, on Udemy and take a course like this because I'm usually, I guess I flip, right? So I watch a bunch of videos online for free on stuff that I'm interested in. And then, you know, if there's a certification and the certification is not too expensive, which I kind of feel like with the, you know, PSM and the CSM, yeah, it's expensive, but not as expensive, at least, you know, from my regard, when I compare it to some of the other ones. I just kind of flip to that, right? Because I've kind of made up my mind, this is what I want to do. I just go and get the cert. So like this kind of exists in between where, like, you know, people, I guess, haven't made up their minds just yet, but those are also markets you'd be competing with, right? So yeah, just
to a degree, yeah. I think, like, you know, when you look at the typical person that just goes to Udemy to buy a course, they're looking for a bit more like guided learning.
yeah,
right?
like
They're
I
like,
just did one in product ops, but
yep,
I guess like I didn't really research how expensive product ops was, and I just kind of wanted to test the waters and, like, you know, get some knowledge. By the way, that's a great, like, you know, area of content that maybe you want to pull in here, because like it does overlap with Scrum, but you know,
yep.
nice enough things.
That'll be like for the Scrum and part at the bottom.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I was just curious, like in terms of like sales and, like, you know, return on investment, right? And what
Yeah,
was coming up for me was like, maybe you can be super lean with this, right? And like maybe, like, you know, just put an introductory course and just see how many people are registering, and, you know, you can have like, hey, coming up, and, like, you know, you get a discount or whatever, but just see how many signups you're getting.
exactly. That's kind of like the whole get something of value as quickly as possible. And then that's exactly what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it out there, right? And if I put like the base version out there and it just gets like a few clicks or not much attention, that's going to tell me something, right? Either I need to go in a bit of a different direction, or it's just that there's not enough stuff there yet, or maybe this isn't a worthwhile endeavor and I should stop. And I'd rather learn that after sprint 3 than after sprint 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 down the road, kind of thing. So I share that. I share that thought and concern for sure.
Sure. You know, just one final thought. In terms of like distinguishing your training from the other trainings out there, right? What I kind of liked about my product ops training was it actually had like quizzes and assignments kind of built in through the course. I didn't do all of them, you know, it's kind of like, you know, got tired at one point. But I think like some forum which allows you to ask real life questions or, like, you know, test your knowledge would kind of, you know, take your you know, experience to another level and just see like, yeah, this is practical. You know, you can have like live Q&A, or maybe not live, but at least through comments or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a functionality that's built into the Udemy platform. It's something to add. It's something that when I first started thinking about doing this, it wasn't really in my mind because I didn't even see it as like a easy technical possibility. But because it is built into the platform, I think probably at each section there is some kind of something, whether it's a quiz or a take home or a whatever. That'll be in there. I think once there's enough content to have some meat in each of the sections, we'll have those in there for sure.
Yep. Cool.
Awesome. Any other last thoughts?
No, it's pretty good.
All right, cool. Well, thanks to you both for spending like an hour on a Friday with me. Super appreciate it. Love the feedback. It's going to make this all a lot better. And maybe we'll see you again at the next sprint review.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Bye.